Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today I'm going to be talking about the current state of Star Wars Battlefront 2, the internet's most hated game, and probably the most controversial game of last year. A few months after the last Battlefront released, I did something similar to this where I talked about how the game was misunderstood and how the DLC had improved the game and tried to sell it to people essentially. And I was originally planning on doing something similar here. So I went to the game to capture some footage that you're seeing now for the game, but I realised that they really haven't done enough to salvage this game. And even though I do feel quite bad for DICE in that they've had to live in the shadow of the original Battlefront 2, which was absolutely fantastic, they haven't done this well to revive it, and certainly not enough for me to say to people watching this, the game is now in a fit state for you to go and play. Yes, they have rectified certain things, and they should be commended for that. They have changed the business model entirely now, so any money that you actually spend on a game is purely cosmetic. There's no kind of pay-to-win element. I mean, there never was in the game. It's almost like that kind of illusion of hindsight where people associate this game with pay-to-win, even though, excluding, I think, the beta, there was never that. But they've improved the business model. They have added new content for free, which is good. And they have improved the progression system, ultimately. But when you play the game, it still doesn't feel quite finished. It doesn't feel quite refined. And in large part, that comes down to an almost jankiness, if you will, a long list of bugs and small issues that amount to an experience that can be fundamentally frustrating. And I have to be careful here, because although I am so far being incredibly negative about the experience, I do enjoy Battlefront 2, and I think that's something that maybe makes my point of view a little bit more distinctive from a lot of channels on YouTube. I don't despise this game. In fact, I've put quite a few hours into the game. I'm not going to say how many hours exactly, but I will say that relative to the majority of games I play, this is one of my most played games of the last 12 months. And you don't invest a significant amount of time into a game unless you enjoy it on some level. But what's quite sad is that what's motivated me a lot of the time is that I expected the game to improve quite significantly in some areas, and it just hasn't, and I'm starting to worry that it won't. And again, it's more like a death from a thousand cuts situation rather than something significant. Back when the game first came out, there was that one big issue. They're trying to get your money. But now it's more of a situation of bugs that have been left in the game because they've spent so much time fixing the issue that came at the beginning. But again, something that I wanted to kind of put out here is something I thought about the other day, is that I do feel bad for DICE, because ultimately what EA must have seen here is the original Battlefront series, which was absolutely phenomenal. It captured the heart of Star Wars, it did something for the time very unique, and it delivered so much content. It covered something for every Star Wars fan. And naturally, EA, wanting to make some money out of that, they wanted to take the Battlefront brand, not just the Star Wars brand, because the Star Wars brand is inherently very strong, but the Battlefront brand, the ideas that embody Battlefront. And one of those ideals, I think, is a large amount of content that allows you to enjoy the game, no matter what area of Star Wars you like, but also the escapist fantasy. And there's an issue with making a game escapist but also heavily online centric. Something that is a bit of an elephant in the room when it comes to online gaming is that for some person in the match to have a really good game, to go on a rampage, for example, imagine that I do really well, unlock Palpatine, and then I go on a total killing spree. For me, that's escapism. I've just gone round, I've done incredibly well, and I feel like the almighty Sith Lord, and that is fantastic, it's great. But think about all those people I had to rampage through to get there. They're not enjoying the game, but they are equally players who have paid for this game and potentially are playing it because they like Star Wars and they want to feel that as well. Well, the reality is, if you're playing an online game, you can't have that where everyone in the match is enjoying that online escapism, because by its very nature, Someone has to win, someone has to lose. That's the way it works. Now, that doesn't fundamentally destroy the nature of online competitive play. Of course it doesn't. When you go to play Call of Duty or Battlefield, for example, there's an acceptance that that is why you play. You play to win and you might lose, and that is the nature of the game. Fortnite, for example, that's all about being that last player in the game, and that is why you play Fortnite. You play it to win. It's a play-to-win game. But with Star Wars, particularly Battlefront, where with the original games it was about just experiencing these battles, you don't necessarily want to be in that play-to-win scenario. You want to be in a scenario where you can just enjoy it and feel like you're a part of the Star Wars universe. You don't want to, potentially, if you're not a particularly skilled player, or just if you are a skilled player but the other players tend to be more skilled, you don't want to be overwhelmed by them. And there will be people who do play Battlefront 2 to be the best and treat it as a competitive game. I mean, I'm guilty of that myself. I do enjoy playing it to win. But there's also a very big part of me that when I say play Galactic Assault on Starkiller Base, it's not just about playing to win. It's also about playing to feel like I'm a part of the battle, that this is something that I am experiencing as part of the Star Wars universe. But when you have a team that can totally wipe you out, it's no longer fun, it's no longer enjoyable, it's not escapism, it's actually quite frustrating, and it undermines that concept of the game. This is something that the original Battlefront games did not suffer from, because if you speak to a lot of people, they will have played the campaign, they will have played the Galactic Conquest mode, which was fantastic, or even just instant action. And in all these modes, although there was a concept of challenge presented by the AI that you could adjust to your liking, there was the fact that you were the player and you had the ultimate power to be, dominating. And so it wasn't rare for you to get into that position of power, but it's something that becomes increasingly rare with these new games where online is so centric. What provoked me to really go down this line of thinking was that I know two people who have played Battlefront. One continues to play it like me, the other very quickly stopped playing. One is someone who loves Star Wars but also loves Call of Duty, so naturally it's the perfect blend of games, right? You have the competitive element of Call of Duty, the fast-paced combat even, but you also have the Star Wars skin. Absolutely perfect, and I am probably fairly in line with that, right? I also enjoy Battlefield, so Battlefront being competitive isn't the biggest put-off to me, but I also know someone who loves Star Wars, a massive Star Wars fan, and they bought Battlefront because they love Star Wars and they wanted to be immersed into the universe, but they just got put off because they went online, they weren't particularly experienced, and they just got decimated, and there was no place for them. They couldn't enjoy it. I mean, there's no fun in just being killed over and over again before you can even do anything. And so this is what has given me this dichotomous view of Battlefront 2, and it's one that I feel like I've adopted even though I don't necessarily feel super conflicted by it. I'm definitely more in line with the bugs and issues, problems, rather than the online-centric side of it. The sad thing is, although I see potential for this game, and like I say, I wouldn't have invested as much time in the game as I have done if I didn't like it on some level. I just wouldn't. It's natural. You don't spend hours doing something that you hate, but I don't think they can redeem it. I think they're too conflicted between redeeming their reputation, fixing all the bugs, making the game balanced, but also delivering content, while also, of course, being massively demotivated to do so, considering let's be honest, the declining reputation of Star Wars, both in the game world, but also the cinematic world. And then just the fact that no one seems to like this game. I mean, imagine being a developer on Battlefront 2. You're developing for a game that seemingly everyone despises. Obviously, not everyone despises, but it's the zeitgeist at the moment. It's the prevailing opinion. So you're sitting there working hard for a game that no matter how hard you try just can't be fixed because your ambition was too much and you can't address every area. You can't address all the bugs. You can't salvage your reputation and add all the content you promised together, particularly when your original model for the game is broken. So it makes me wonder, is the best thing for even the Battlefront players for us to just let this game go and see something entirely fresh come out of it, a new Battlefront with an entirely different approach to development, maybe even a reorientation towards a single player experience? Probably not very likely, me almost doing some wishful thinking there, but hey, madder things have happened.